Well, hello everybody, and thank you all for joining me today and allowing me to join in this conversation. Today, I want to talk about some events that took place earlier in my life and probably the life of some of you who are watching and others who will be listening. I'm talking about the 1960s. Don't worry, it doesn't matter if you were there or not. Timothy Leary said that if you can remember the 60s, you probably weren't really there. I do, however, remember most of what was happening 50 years ago, but there are still some things I'm working to remember and some things that I'm also working to forget. I also want to look at some events that took place 2,600 years ago and how this all relates to what is happening now and how it's relative to the relationship between Uranus and Neptune. A horoscope is a snapshot that captures the freeze action of a single moment in time. Actually, it's more like a single frame from a 3D movie, and perhaps it's really a 5D movie. Through astrology, we know that that moment contains a holistically synthesized multiplicity of cycles that are all in a constant state of becoming. Evolutionary fractals, wheels within wheels within wheels. So how many of us, how many of you are feeling right now that we're passing through a time of chaos whose meaning is hard to fathom? Me too, to coin a phrase which is in great circulation right now. Me too. Chaos stems from the Greek word chaos, meaning vast chasm or void. It means complete disorder and confusion. It's the primordial matter from which the source of all creation was formed. Physics defines chaos as behavior so unpredictable as to appear at random and as the formless matter which is supposed to have existed before the creation of the universe. Chaos itself has a mythological connection to the origin of all things. In Hesiod's version, in Hegonomy, his version of the creation story, presents chaos as the first of the primordial gods to emerge at the dawn of creation, from which came the primeval deities Gaia, the goddess of the earth, and Tartarus, the primordial god who ruled over the abyss, where, according to Plato, souls are judged after death, and where the wicked receive divine punishment. The union of these two primeval immortals spawns the terror that will later haunt our story. Here are some things that others who are a little bit more brighter than I am have said about chaos. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. That's Carl Jung. Paul Cézanne said, we live in a rainbow of chaos. Bob Dylan's version was that I accept chaos, but I'm not sure whether it accepts me. And Henry Miller said that chaos is the score upon which reality is written. In chaos, there's fertility, from Aeneas Nin, I think I pronounced your name correctly. And E.E. Cummings said, awake, chaos, we have napped. I think all of these are appropriate and all in some way really do apply to the time we're passing through. This cosmological theme of something being born from no thing occurs over and over again in ancient scripture, mythos, and legend. According to the Kabbalah, the void is called Ein Sof, or the endless one, that which has no end, the empty, timeless, boundless space from which the world originated. This concept in Latin, called ex nihilo, or the idea that God created the world out of nothing, is central today to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and is found in creation stories from ancient Egypt, the Rig Veda, and many of the animistic cultures of Africa, Asia, Oceania, and North America. The planetary pair I'd like to talk about today is the cycle of Uranus and Neptune. But since this is an EA community, not surprising, we're also going to uncover the workings of Pluto. Sorry about that. As hard as I tried, I couldn't come up with anything better than this quote from Richard Tarnas in Cosmos and Psyche to describe this planetary pair. He wrote that the Uranus-Neptune combination is associated both in history and in personal biographies with the periods in which the archetypal, the mythic, the spiritual, the transcendent, the imaginal, and the numinous is suddenly awakened and liberated in new ways into human consciousness. We see in it the collective awakening of an intense desire to merge with a greater unity, to reconnect with the earth and all forms of life on it, with the cosmos and with the community of being. We see in it the powerful new awareness of the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And we see in the widespread urge to overcome old separations and dualisms between human beings and nature, between spirit and matter, between mind and body, subject and object, intellect and soul, and perhaps most fundamentally, and what we're really experiencing today, is between masculine and feminine, to discover a deeper unit of consciousness. Uranus and Neptune share a 172-year cycle. In 600 BCE, before the Common Era, 15 cycles, or approximately 2,600 years ago, a time frame that synchronistically correlates to the precession of the equinoxes, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto conjoined each other successively in the sign of Taurus over a 3-year period. New ways of thinking appeared in Persia, India, China, and the Greco-Roman world in religion and philosophy, and a striking parallel development without any obvious direct cultural contact between all of the participating European cultures, Eurasian cultures. During this period, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, the mystery cults of the Mediterranean region, and Confucianism emerged on the planet, a truly remarkable synchronicity. Confucius and Lao Tzu were living in China, and all the schools of Chinese philosophy came into being. India produced the Upanishads, and Buddha, like China, ran the whole gamut of philosophical possibilities down to materialism, skepticism, and nihilism. In Iran, Zarathustra taught a challenging view of the world as a struggle between good and evil. In Palestine, the prophets made their appearance from Elijah by way of Isaiah and Jeremiah to Isaiah. Greece witnessed the appearance of Homer, Plato, and Archimedes. Everything implied by these names developed during these few centuries almost simultaneously in China, India, and the West. It's all from Carl Jasper. From an evolutionary perspective, Uranus correlates to the process of individuation. In other words, how we unfold uniquely as ourselves as part of community. Uranus is said to rule the sign of Aquarius, which in the cycle of the natural zodiac follows the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn correlates to structure and the crystallization of new forms. It correlates to society as a whole, to the consensus agreements we have made with each other, and to the laws, customs, standards, ethics, and mores that become crystallized as the structure of our society. Discovered at the time of the American and French revolutions, Uranus correlates to revolution and the violent overthrow of the status quo. In order to individuate, the crystallized forms must of necessity be shattered. The collective herd mentality and consensus behavior must be interrupted, sometimes disrupted. From the perspective of our emotionally based lives that seek security in what is known and familiar, these disruptions and interruptions are clearly going to be traumatic and chaotic. The planet Neptune correlates to the collective unconscious and to the zeitgeist that permeates our culture. Neptune correlates to the mass media and to disease, toxins, and epidemics. From an evolutionary astrology perspective, Neptune facilitates the process of spiritualization, the shift from separateness to reconnection, to the realization that everything is part of us and we are a part of everything else. Poseidon to the Greeks, Neptune to the Romans was the god of the waters, both the oceans and the rivers. Water is the great dissolver, either slowly over time or by the powerful effect of rapidly flowing currents. Neptune, which is said to rule the sign of Pisces, completes the cycle of the natural zodiac. What is being dissolved is everything that has come before so that a new cycle can begin. In the sign of Aquarius, and through the dynamics of the planet Uranus, the ego has found its greatest expression of uniqueness, but also the awareness of its connection to the natural world and a growing awareness of being part of something much greater than itself. Neptune correlates to that no thing, the void, the chaos, and the disorder, the ex nihilo, which some call creation, the universe, God, or the source of all that is. I'd like to uncover the meaning of these celestial events through telling some stories of the mythology. Following Rick Tarnas's lead, I have cast Prometheus in the role of Uranus. Futurist, nonconformist, rebel, idealist, and provocateur. Our hero challenges and disrupts the status quo by stealing fire, the leading technology of the age, from Olympus for the benefit of mankind. He also stole the finest portion of meat reserved for Zeus alone and gave it to mankind. As most Greek dramas go, for all his glorious hubris, the storyline gets rocky, literally. Chained to a massive outcropping of stone, Prometheus is attacked and traumatized over and over again by a great bird of prey. Our story does end well, as eventually teacher and healer Chiron facilitates our hero's rescue. The mythology of Neptune reveals a revengeful and violent character, exposing the darker side of the patriarchy. He is a rapist, having molested his sister Demeter, Medusa, and the maiden Ceneus. The mythology also tells us of his jealousy and revengefulness when Pallas Athena was chosen over him to be the patron deity of the city that would be called Athens. There's also his relentless pursuit of Odysseus. The mythology of Pisces, the sign which Neptune rules, and the sign represents a metaphor that is reflected in our times. According to Greek myth, Aphrodite and her son Eros, who was Cupid to the Romans, were fleeing the monster Typhon, who was set loose by Gaia to punish Zeus and the Olympians for having overthrown their father Kronos and the Titans. According to Hesiod in the Theogony, quote, Typhon had 100 dragons' heads from which black tongues flicked out. Fire blazed from their eyes in each of these heads, and from them came a cacophony of sound. According to Greek myth, the story goes that all of the Olympians fled the fearful Typhon. Aphrodite and her son Eros escaped to the Euphrates River and took cover among the reeds. Aphrodite became fearful, and she called for help to the water nymphs. As they leapt into the river, they tied themselves together with rope in order not to lose each other. In the sky, the two fish of Pisces are represented swimming at right angles to each other, one northward and the other westward, their tails joined by a cord or ribbon. Remember that Typhon is the offspring of Gaia and Tartarus, who are in turn the offspring of chaos. Typhon is the archetype of terror, an overwhelming awareness of danger, a sense of dread that threatens to crush our emotional equilibrium. In their flight from the Typhon and their need to find refuge, Aphrodite and Eros experience chaos, traumatic disruption, and fearfulness. Because of his hubris, challenging the status quo, Prometheus experiences harrowing consequences as well. These stories hold the themes of individuation, rebellion, idealism, advancement of new technologies, the necessity of change, and self-sacrifice. There's also profound transformation and transcendence as our heroes and heroine are released from the trauma and chaos, emerging into new form. The protagonists experience chaotic change where they must surrender to new evolving circumstances. So you're probably wondering what all this has to do with what's happening right now. Why this is significant is because these two outer planets are currently forming a tense aspect between each other, not just once, but 5 times. We've had the first 2 meetups, most recently in August and October. There will be one in June and one in December of 2018, and one last time in May of 2019. This planetary aspect also crosses the critical threshold from Pisces to Aries, correlates to something being born from no thing. Something new is being born, but at this moment in the cycle, we are witnessing disintegration and dissolution. The aspect we're looking at is what is known as a crescent semisquare, or half square. A square angle is 90 degrees. Here we're looking at a 45-degree angle between 2 planets. Some astrologers consider this to be a minor degree. In my humble opinion, no aspect between outer planets is minor. In fact, this particular relationship can be quite stressful, as we are seeing in the world around us, and I think it is safe to say in our personal lives as well. Besides what is known as being an orb of an aspect, there's also a phase relationship between any 2 planets, any 2 celestial objects corresponding to the 8 phases of the moon. Crescent phase is the second phase following the first phase, or new phase. New phase corresponds to the instinctually yang energy consumed by random experimentation, what the Hindus called neti, not this, not this. At the very beginning of the cycle, a diversity of choices is made and results accepted or rejected through trial and error. Oh, sorry. I think I skipped I guess that's it. In the crescent phase, the struggle is to maintain what has been chosen and actualized as the new phase. As planets transit the yin crescent phase, a tension is created, as the energy must now reverse direction and move forward to begin to take stock of what has been experienced. In the natural zodiac, this point corresponds to 15 degrees of Taurus, a point filled with archetypal anxiety, as the transition is occurring from fixed to mutable qualities. In essence, this threefold point is struggling to integrate the instinctual fire energy of the new phase, the grounded earth energy of Taurus, and the quicksilver air energies of Gemini. During previous Uranus-Neptune conjunctions in 1307, Dante Alighieri begins to write the Divine Comedy. In 1478, the Spanish Inquisition begins. In the same year, Christopher Columbus receives maps and papers charting the seas and winds around the ocean sea. In 1817, construction of the Erie Canal began. Joseph Smith, founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, receives his first vision in Palmyra, New York. And Michael Faraday's work in electromagnetism produces the foundation for what will be field theory in modern physics, which includes the formula E = mc squared. And close to locally here for us, the Santa Fe Trail was first used, moving people from east to west. During the last waxing semisquare in the 1840s, the first wagon train sets out from Missouri. First publicly funded telegraph line in the world between Baltimore and Washington is raised. The Communist Manifesto was published, and the revolutions of 1948 in Europe. And the first women's right convention took place in the United States, and gold was discovered in California, and anesthesia was first used. In all of these historic events, we can see the reflection of the themes that were revealed in the mythology. Dante and Columbus both chose the hero's journey. Dante's poem, which became one of the great works of world literature, describes the medieval view of man's connection to the divine. Christopher Columbus expanded the known boundaries of the earth. He also helped dispel the belief that the world is flat, an idea which oddly has resurfaced during this current Uranus-Neptune transit. The gold rush, the Erie Canal, the telegraph, the Santa Fe Trail, and the wagon trains that traversed it increased the connectivity, accessibility, and facilitated the growth of the populated area of the planet's landmass geometrically. Faraday's work was a foundation of modern science. The revolutions of 1848 resulted in the dissolution of many of the dynastic monarchies in Europe and the consolidation of sovereign territories into new nation states. Anesthesia revolutionized surgical procedure. The establishment of the Mormon Church and the terror created by the Spanish Inquisition demonstrate both the light and shadow of organized religion. All of these events are correlations to Uranus, Neptune, and their ongoing cycles. The current cycle of Uranus and Neptune began at the last conjunction in 1993, which occurred against the backdrop of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction that had occurred 30 years earlier in the late 1960s. Interestingly, Uranus and Neptune were in a waning sextile during most of that decade. In essence, Uranus handed off to Neptune the evolutionary impulse that it had picked up from Pluto at the conjunction. The internet appeared for the first time in the 1960s as ARPANET, which stands for the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was the first computer network developed by the Department of Defense to link the federal government with major hospitals, universities, and other critical sites in the event of a national crisis or disaster. In the early 1900s, when Uranus and Neptune joined, Tim Berners-Lee, an English engineer and computer scientist, released the code for the first version of what would later become the World Wide Web. In 30 or so years that have ensued, the World Wide Web has evolved into a synthesis of highly individuated and differentiated creativity and connectivity, creating an entirely new medium of expression, a new dimension of human connectivity from a field made up of simply ones and zeros, a virtual global community outside of time and space that was born out of no thing. During the time of the last Uranus-Neptune conjunction, the Berlin Wall came down, reconnecting the disconnected parts of Germany and Europe. The Human Genome Project began its search to find the core elements of life. The Gulf War would mark with horrid distinction the beginning of the longest period of American involvement in foreign war. The Channel was completed under the English Channel, connecting Great Britain and the European continent together as one. Now, at the semi-square of Uranus and Neptune, we are witnessing Brexit and the potential dissolution of the EU. Since that time, many of us have become permanent residents of cyberspace. It is an understatement to say that this new digital technology has radically altered our world. Cyberspace revived the art of the written word. When was the last time you sat down and actually wrote a letter? Yet how many emails, text messages, or tweets did you send out or receive today? In 1993, we moved from the industrial age to the information age. Personally, I don't ascribe to astrology being best served as a predictive science, but we can let our intuition tell us some of the things that we might expect to unfold based on the trends from the past. We're currently experiencing the early waxing stages of two of the cycles of the outer planets. Over the last 5 years, Uranus and Pluto have completed 7 epic waxing squares correlating to a crisis in action, how we are actualizing or not the dreams and visions of the 1960s, and now the struggles inherent in the current unfolding of 5 waxing semisquares between Uranus and Neptune. Our country was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In reality, except for a brief bubble during the 20th century, only lip service has been given to these words. In our time, we are witnessing a collective voice demanding the individual, racial, gender, age, religious, and ethnic parity. Women, Blacks, Native Americans, immigrants, and even school children are now demanding equality and the assurance of their safety from misogyny, bigotry, persecution, and physical and sexual violence. The 5 most valuable American companies, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, control much of the online infrastructure, from app stores to operating systems to cloud storage to nearly all the online ad business. A handful of broadband companies, AT&T, Charter, Comcast, and Verizon, many of which are also aiming to become content companies, because why not, provide virtually all of the internet connections to American homes and smartphones. But this isn't really the internet. It's not the open, anyone can build it network of the 1990s and early 2000s. The internet that emerged at the beginning of this Uranus-Neptune cycle linked the world router to router, facilitated by the chthonic, individuating, evolutionary energy of the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in the 1960s. Born as grassroots technology with hardware and software created in basements and garages, open source became its catchword. Today, we are struggling to not just maintain, but to retain the channels and the freedom of information that we have taken so dearly for granted. The transit of Uranus through the sign of Taurus has great potential to create disruption, if not chaos, in the banking system and financial markets in general. Many cities and states are already facing bankruptcy or severe budgetary shortages. The paradigm that the economy must be driven by debt will begin to disappear. Neptune is the public. North Dakota is currently the only state with a public bank and no longer has the need to depend on federal funding for state projects. The idea of a public bank for Santa Fe was first introduced by activist, author, radio host Craig Barnes and his grassroots organization, We're the People. And I encourage you, this was written for my local people, to learn more where we can establish a public bank. And I encourage everybody in your own state to find the organizations, the grassroots that are also working, because New Mexico is not the only place that's working towards this. It's equivalent to erasing serfdom during the Middle Ages, because we are all serfs, we're all slaves to the debt which has been accumulated over the past 100 years. Healthcare is not a privilege, it's a human right. Just as Prometheus stole the choicest portion of meat from mankind, the potential exists for all of humanity to share in the benefits of universal healthcare. Wellness, the basis of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is not something that needs to be earned or rewarded. It is a basic right of human existence, and it is significant to note that the word typhus stems from the Greek typhus, typhon. In the 1960s, we heard the meme, "You are what you eat." There's an Ayurvedic proverb that says that food is medicine. When diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. When the diet is correct, medicine is of no need. Neptune corresponds directly to toxins and diseases of unknown origin. Uranus will interrupt the cycle of toxic food production, enabling new technologies that will improve the current state of wellness among the world population. Over the last 40 years, factory farming has usurped food production in the United States. The healthcare revolution will encompass the restoration of a healthy food industry dedicated to the well-being of the people, not the corporatocracy. Neptune is our collective unconscious. It's our zeitgeist. It holds the anima mundi, the world soul that guides the destiny of the planet. When will we finally begin to recognize the sanctity of spaceship Earth? Are we finally moving steadily towards a global consciousness that makes us understand what affects one of us impacts all of us? Plato said that all of human consciousness falls into the category of either fate or necessity. Fate results from the unfolding of soul intention. Necessity is what occurs when soul intention is diverted or denied. At the core of this moment in history, there's a crisis to actualize the dreams and visions of the 1960s. In this current cycle, we are struggling to regain the health and wellness of our population, the wholesomeness of our food and water, a free and open cyberspace environment, to bring science back in line with nature and the authentic needs of people, and to flatten the widening economic, ethnic, and racial disparities. The global village is no longer just virtual, it is here. There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We are all crew. That's what I've got for you.
Great, Daniel. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Daniel? Okay, well, if there are no questions, we'll Wanda, go ahead. Yes?
I was just kind of wondering, too, as far as the Neptune, what do you think is Neptune's involvement as far as the information highway? It kind of seems like it plays a part in it as well as Uranus.
Well, it's our mass media. So the internet, I think, has become part of that infrastructure. And Neptune has certainly permeated it. There seems to be no bounds to the internet. I think the internet is a perfect example. The World Wide Web is a perfect example of Neptune because it really has no boundaries. It extends beyond time and space. And one of the most amazing experiences, I think, is how we can all be in this place, this where we are now. We're all in different places. We're all in different time zones. It has literally transcended time and space. And that's about as Neptunian as you can get. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It definitely goes along with what I was thinking, because I've always kind of, because of the vastness, because of they say the no boundaries, I've always kind of associated Neptune also with that, in addition to Uranus.
Right, and and it's all reflected in our media, in the movies, and what's being broadcast, on the networks, in the books that are being published. It's really a reflection of who we are, and unfortunately, it also has a reverberation back into our culture. I think that a lot of the gun violence is all the video games, the violence that's in the movies, and the violence that's available, for kids on their computers, was really contributing to it. It's this disassociation with life and death, and the feeling that there's no pain somehow. It's a little scary, personally.
Could it also be a revealing of the truth of the true nature? Because even before video games, before computers, humans have been very, very violent towards each other. And maybe it's revealing that, definitely pulling off those rose-colored glasses that, oh no, we can never be like that when we've always been like that.
Right. I agree with you 100%. I think in a lot of ways, Wanda, we've come to the greatest elongation of our separateness, perhaps. So, you know what I'm saying?
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question.
And I hope that we will cease to see these violent movies that are being pumped out all the time.
Yep.
Shocking.
It is shocking. But, then again, we have the ones that kind of, I think Wonder Woman was a great contribution. So it's...
yeah, I saw that. That was great. Yeah.
So we're getting the light and the shadow, and unfortunately, there's a lot of shadow that's being exposed, but it needs to be exposed. We can't heal it until we shine some light on it, and right, it's all been denied and repressed for literally a millennium.
That's a very good way to look at it, Daniel. Thank you very much. Any final questions? Okay, Daniel, thank you. That brings us to the end of your meeting. Until we see you again, would you all please thank Daniel Fiverson?
Thank you, Daniel. This is certainly worth a listen. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and listening to my rant.
Very stimulating.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.